Alright, hello. Again, I found this video about, I'm looking through my settings here, about this thing, which, I don't know, considering the way that it's, like, phrased, seems like, yeah, it seems like a series. Um, Still no comments, which is depressing. But, I don't know, guess I'd figured see what's to it, and I don't know if it takes a really long time, maybe I'll just like come back to it. But I'm hoping it doesn't take a super duper long time. We'll see. We'll see. Here goes nothing.
You are about to watch an episode of my awesome new series.
Ugh.
If I do say so myself. Seriously, I'm very proud of this show. Every episode, I dismantle and debunk a common leftist myth.
Leftist myth. Okay, this looks like the end.
Today on Debunked, we're going to discuss a very common question. Can a man be a woman?
What?
Dr. Levine, do you believe that minors are capable of making such a life-changing decision as changing one's sex?
Well, Senator, thank you for your interest in this question. Transgender medicine is a very complex and nuanced field.
The specific question was about minors. Let's be a little more specific since you evaded the question. Do you support the government intervening to override the parent's consent to give a child puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and/or amputation surgery of breasts and genitalia?
Senator, transgender medicine is a very complex...
The answer clearly is yes. As Levine...
The answer clearly is yes. I don't think so. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure usually you just do puberty blockers if you're in... Yeah, transitional surgeries don't even start until 18. Clinics don't offer surgery of any kind to change genitals to children under 18. That's just not a thing that happens. Like, Rand Paul is, like, fear-mongering about a thing that doesn't exist.
Levine even told a former Trump administration official. Just pause on that for a moment and think about how crazy that is.
I've never felt
An ad? Are you for real?
Possibility of disclosure. The Nephilim.
What?
Now, in the past few years, you've heard a lot of statements that sound like we must not raise boys as boys and girls as girls.
Well, I don't want to linger on this for. I started to pause it to respond, and then I realized that if I responded to everything, it's gonna take forever to get through this. But I mean that's kind of simplistic. I think that it's probably more suffice to say that it's just certain aspects of masculinity need adjustment.
Because we just can't be sure that kids actually have the sex assigned to them at birth.
I don't think that's the reason why. I think it's because there's some aspects of masculinity that are harmful.
You've heard that some people are men in women's bodies, or women in men's bodies.
Yup, that can happen. Because sometimes it's just the way it shakes out with like, I don't know, human development, I guess is the best term for it.
You may even have heard that if you're a straight dude and you don't want to have sex with a trans woman, meaning a biological male, this makes you gay. All of this is insane.
No one's ever said that. What?
Patent nonsense.
Oh god, here we go.
Males and females reproduce with one another in the human species.
This is like... It sounds like some like actual documentary, and then he's like, male and female have sex. It's like, oh my god, it's so like bare bones level of intellectual. It's not even really intellectual, but it's like, it's got like the aesthetic, but it doesn't have the information for it. That's the problem.
We've known this for quite a while.
Sure.
The simple reality is that the human species is sexually dimorphic. Sex is binary. We come in two brands, male and female. Typically, those who have the XY chromosome.
Sex isn't gender, and I'm gonna. Yeah, I even think I've searched that. Harvard. Stop it. Yeah. Gender scientist. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Chromosomes are male. Those who have XX chromosomes are female.
Isn't that the Prince symbol?
Males and females differ. They differ in size and shape, and musculature, brain function. As neuroscientist Steven Pinker says, differences between the sexes are part of the human condition.
None of that is relevant to transgender stuff, though. Like, because gender isn't. Gender refers to, sex refers to biological attributes, gender refers to socially constructed roles. So when we're talking about transgender, gender, it's different. Classic conflation, Ben.
There are certainly people who have anomalous genetic conditions, like Klinefelter syndrome, in which a person has two X chromosomes and a Y chromosome, and in whom breast development looks female while male genitalia are present. Overall, disorders of sexual development affect 1 in every 5,000 births.
So we have that. Yep. Okay.
Now, the presence of abnormal
What is
development
this?
does
Look at
not
him
mean
fly.
that
Look at him. He's flying. Wow. That's impressive.
sex is a spectrum. To suggest otherwise, it would be the same thing as saying that because one
Wait, let me
child
back
every
up.
2,000 spectrum. Now, the presence of abnormal development does not mean that sex is a spectrum.
Okay, so two things. Yes, it is a spectrum. Gender is a spectrum. But did you notice how he said sex, but what appears is gender, which again are two completely different things, but he's saying are the same, but they're not. But if they're if they were the same, it would be different, obviously, but they're not the same. And gender is a spectrum. So like this is all kind of void. Like his basis is completely wrong for this, which is impressive considering he's supposed to be an intellectual.
Just otherwise, it would be the same thing as saying that because one child every few thousand is born with 3 toes, this means that the number of toes in the human being is a spectrum.
Well, I'm not sure the the commonness of of like 4 toes to 6 toes, but I suppose in a technical sense you could say that it is a spectrum because there are developments genetically that can give you more or less toes. I don't think that's probably the way to phrase it because it doesn't have the same like normalness, like, and like I don't know if it's more or less common. I don't really know than being transgender, but I I mean technically I guess you could call it that even though. Oh my god, I thought I could miscount the number of toes for a second. Okay, but yeah, no, I guess I mean in a way it could be, but I just don't think people use the term that way.
Or that a person with 3 toes might actually be a sloth human, a 3-toed sloth human.
What? What does it have to do with anything?
All reproduction is rooted in the presence of sexual dimorphism.
Oh,
To pretend otherwise is biologically nonsensical.
what?
That's why, to end a conversation on transgenderism, just ask for a simple, non-self-referential definition of the terms man and woman.
Well, in what context? Because that won't end it, Ben. That's not true, Ben. I feel like this is what I have to say every time you open your mouth, Ben. But that's just not how it works. Like, look, here's the thing, okay? Here's the thing is that all right. So, again, it depends on what context we're talking about here for man and woman. Like, is it the sex version or the gender version? Because in the gender version, again, we have spectrums and we have like, it's more about roles than like attributes and all this stuff. So, again, we're dealing with some big differences, and you're just not acknowledging the reality of this. You're just ignoring the reality of the situation.
When I say non-self-referential, I mean you can't say, I feel like a woman, therefore I am a woman.
Yeah, you kind of can. You kind of can. Yeah, that kind of is a thing. If someone identifies more with that gender, then yeah, they can just do that. Yeah, that's sort of how it works.
For advocates of biology, the answer for what is woman or what is man is simple. You can look at chromosomes.
Advocates of biology. It's simple. Advocates of biology. It's simple. For advocates of biology, research shows that sex, along with gender, is anything but binary. Wow. Anti-scientific sentiment bombards our politics, says the IDW, Ben Shapiro's group. Wow. They're guilty. Wow. Crazy. Would you believe it? Advocates of biology do not agree with Ben Shapiro.
SRY genes, reproductive systems, verifiable answers to the question. For advocates of the position that some biological men are women, or vice versa, there is no standard that can be applied.
It's a spectrum, Ben. I think there's certain traits within roles in society that associate more with one gender side than the other. So I suppose that could be your standard if you want a standard. But not your, like, you don't even have a standard. Your standard is wrong. There is no standard there.
A man can become a woman or a woman a man at any time without any stable definition of man or woman whatsoever.
Well, there is a definition. It would be masculine traits are for the gender man. What the heck is that? Is that snake? Anyways, yeah. I should probably move off this screen. Okay, there we go. I was actually just thinking about it, and I was like, I probably don't want to leave that lingering there on the YouTube video. Shoot, I forgot my train of thought because I had to change the thing. But yeah, you can go by like gender roles for masculinity and femininity. That can be your definition if you want, and then however many people match can be how much of each they are if you want.
So according to our pseudo-medical activist, gender identity...
Pseudo-medical activist? That's quite bold of you to call the doctor and expert a pseudo-medical activist. And when when they disagree with you, and most scientific research does too. So that's quite fascinating, really.
Is completely separate from sex. The separation between gender and sex relies on a simple fallacy: that gender is entirely socially constructed and thus separate from biology.
Yep, it is, because that's how it works. It's not a fallacy.
Gender in this iteration would be all the various feminine qualities that adhere to womanhood, or the masculine qualities that adhere to being a man. According to these folks, gender and sex are completely different.
Yep.
Right? All of those gendered notions of femininity, they're completely separate from being a biological female.
Yep.
This Cartesian notion that you can be a woman in a man's body, a soul in the machine, because your gender is separate from your sex, is utterly unsupportable at any level.
Wrong. Just wrong. It's not unsupportable. You're just lying. You're just lying, Ben. There's nothing to say besides you're just wrong. You're just flat out wrong. and incorrect. Like, it's laughable how this is just completely unsupportable on your end.
Everyone understands there are some attributes that are generally considered more masculine. Chopping wood,
Wow.
being dumb,
I'm whizzing with the door
True.
open, and I love it.
and some that are considered more feminine. Being caring, being nice, right? These are distinctions that do appear in virtually all cultures. Some of that is undoubtedly biologically oriented, and some is undoubtedly social construction. But it is simply ridiculous to suggest that if a boy is effeminate, he's actually a girl.
No. No. It's not that if you are, then you can have, how do I phrase it? You can have those traits and still be a guy if you want to consider yourself still a guy. Like, I don't know the best way to. I'm looking for an overarching word or term that can summarize it, but there isn't really one. It's just kind of like if you have the traits of a more feminine person and you don't feel like a man, like there are still guys that have more typically feminine traits, but they're still guys. And then there are guys who have more feminine traits and are then like transgender and become a woman. So like it's not, it doesn't necessarily have to mean that you are the opposite gender if you hold more of those traits, but it could mean that. Like it's yeah, I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but they don't have to necessarily be like it doesn't always mean if one then the other, basically.
Or that if a girl is masculine,
Oh,
she
another
might actually
ad.
be a boy. But this is what gender theorists
No, it's not what they want. Well, that didn't work.
argue.
That's not.
The origins of the gender identity movement lie with a professor of medical psychology at Johns Hopkins in the 1960s. His name was John
I
Money.
guarantee you this is not where it started.
After twin boys were born, and after a botched circumcision destroyed one boy's penis,
Hold on a minute. Hold on a minute. What's Let's see. Well, the term developed from Hirschfeld in 19 transgender in 1971. The first sex change operations took place in 1910 with the German sexologist Magnus Hirschfeld. Right. I think his place got burned down by the Nazis, I believe, actually, which didn't help because we lost a lot of transgender science at that point. But so we're talking about 1910 at the latest, and they're documenting transgender priests 4,500 years ago in Akkad. So this is a pretty typical thing in human development. This isn't something that came in the 1960s.
that boy was raised as a girl. By the time that boy was a teenager, the boy felt extraordinary discomfort because he was biologically male, and his parents
Uh, 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 oh, oh. Where are you going with this, Ben? Because I think where you're going with this isn't where you think you're going with this.
told him the truth. Both twins ended up killing themselves in their mid-30s.
David had the wrong gender associated with his body. Therefore, he had gender dysphoria. And therefore, that just kind of supports trans stuff because that's what trans people deal with. Just like without the operation usually at the beginning. They just don't usually have that beginning operation thing, but that's kind of what they deal with. And then if it had been fixed, David would have felt much better. Almost guaranteed, probably, I imagine. So this isn't a negative thing. This is if you adjust it to fit what a person desires their gender identity to be, then they'll feel much better about it. That's what transgenderism is about, Ben.
That didn't stop John Money from founding the Johns Hopkins Gender Identity Clinic in 1965. His theory was children could identify as members of the opposite sex, and that radical surgery was the proper solution.
Why did that sound so
That
awkward?
inside, these kids were members of the opposite sex in reality, and that surgery would merely make their bodies align with their identity. Money claims that, quote, the gender identity gate is open at birth for a normal child, no less than for one born with unfinished sex organs, and would stay that way for at least a year. So in other words, you could have a full biological boy with finished sex organs, and his gender identity was still open. Brains and bodies were considered in direct opposition, completely separate from one another.
I mean, in a way, it does happen sometimes, actually. Wait. Sometimes. Brain of opposite sex, brain of opposite gender. I don't know if I should which term I wanted, but this is the term I. Plus, it's easier to type that. Oh, come on. I used to be able to read these articles too. Do I have to go back to this one again? I'm just looking for biological sex is far more complicated than XXXY. Thank you, Ben, for not understanding that. Where's the one? There we are. No such thing as male brain or female brain. Come on, where is it? Where is it? I was thinking of a thing where usually the it was an older story, or not older, but like I saw it a while ago. I mean, that was like, it doesn't seem to be in this article. Anyways, I'm not gonna waste too much time looking for it. But basically what it was talking about is that they can kind of have like in the ways that there are limited differences between male and female brains. Sometimes transgender people can have the brain of the opposite gender. So it's like, like they might be male, like sex organs, but female brain, for whatever differences there are between those male and female brains.
Radical feminists like Judith Butler began arguing that all gender was socially constructed.
Yeah.
And that therefore, all inequalities in outcome between men and women could be laid at the feet of an evil, sexist society.
Well,
if gender is a meaningless social construct created by society, why does it matter more than sex, which is actual real biology? And why is gender more real than biology itself? Why would anyone need to change his or her body in order to align with gender, a social construction,
with their personal preferences?
When gender and sex are completely separate in the first place?
It's just what they want.
Gender dysphoria, which is what we're talking about here, is a serious and tragic disorder. It is also extremely rare. According to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5th edition, those who had received a diagnosis of gender identity disorder or transsexualism and were seeking hormone treatment and or surgery represented just 0.005 to 0.014% for males and 0.002 to 0.003% for females. Those stats are now rising dramatically.
We have that big announcement from an Oscar-nominated actor.
Those stats are now rising dramatically because now people can actually do what they want without getting killed or like harassed or discriminated against as much. That's why. It's because there's always been more of those people. They just haven't been able to be themselves.
Announcing he is transgender.
Oh,
Elliot Page came out publicly with a post about his identity.
And in that post, now liked nearly 2.5 million times.
That's a lot of likes.
To myself close and fully embrace who I am. The more I dream, the more my heart grows, and
that's
the more
a lot
I
of
thrive.
likes.
And guys, that's what we love to see.
Yes, he is going to help so many. Janae, thank you so much.
People suffering from gender dysphoria, which, in its non-politicized definition, means the persistent belief that you're a member of the opposite sex, have a tragically high suicidal ideation and depression rate.
Yeah, because of people like you who pass laws that prevent them from adjusting it because crazy thought. This is crazy, man. And viewer, too. I know this is going to be a mind-boggling idea. Can I find one that's not a scientific study that's not going to let me, that's going to just kick me away from it? Please. Wow, transgender individual gender-affirming surgery can lead to long-term mental health benefits. Significantly associated with a decrease in mental health treatment. Wow. It's almost like the solution is the treatment.
That suicidal ideation rate remains tragically high,
Yeah, because
after surgical and hormonal treatment.
it remains higher,
Longitudinal studies
but
that are
goes
good
down a
just
lot.
do not exist on the efficacy of these measures. And the mental health problems associated with gender dysphoria remain extremely damaging, even in particularly accepting societies. But suffering from a mental disorder does not change your underlying sex. And
There's still suffering, even in accepting societies, because people like you, Ben, prevent them from trying to do stuff. Places like Texas and Florida and Arkansas and all these places pass bills that prevent trans people from doing their thing. And then, oh my God, they're sad and they commit suicide and all this stuff. And it's because you and people like you aren't following the science that says that if they just get the treatment, then their rate of depression and suicide will go down.
any more than believing that you are Napoleon Bonaparte makes you Napoleon Bonaparte.
It's just ridiculous
Transgender
comparisons.
activists make an objective claim about reality based on subjective internal feelings. That's unsustainable. What's more, transgender
Not
activists
really.
demand that you abandon reason, biology,
Abandon reason by...
privacy, even the ability to raise your kids.
Okay. No. No. I forget what the third one was, and no, but I'm assuming the third one was probably no as well. But no, this is... What the fuck? Come on. God damn it, dude. This isn't... No, it's not... Clearly not reason and science, because, again, that's not on his side. Privacy. That was the third one. I don't understand what privacy has to do with anything here. You don't have to do anything. And, raising your kids, yeah, you don't have to do anything. You're not forced to do anything. Like, just fear-mongering.
In concert with reality, in favor of a delusional quasi-religious worldview in which gender and sex are completely segregated and a boy can be a girl and a girl a boy.
You mean like the scientific reality? Oh, look at that. An ad. Another one. How many ads are on his videos, dude?
Now, none of this means that anybody suffering from gender dysphoria ought to be mistreated. Anybody with any sort of disorder ought to be treated with nothing but sympathy and care. But this does mean that a society that seeks to propagandize to children that they can switch their gender is both...
Okay, so you don't seem to support the first one because, again, conservatives are passing all kinds of bills that prevent the first one, and the second one is not propagandizing. It's just saying that they can. That's not propagandizing. It's just like saying that fact in the world. Like, it's not going to have... Propagandizing implies some kind of nefarious impact, when really it's like, if more kids do it, it's just because it's accepted, so they feel safe to. Not whatever. Not like some evil plot to, like, make them do it when they didn't want to before.
lying to kids and doing them psychological harm in the process.
It's not.
Unfortunately, that's exactly what our society is now teaching kids in public schools. Anti-biological nonsense, including the lie that you
None of this is... No.
might just be a different gender with different pronouns. And it's not just that. With the new Equality Act,
The motion is adopted.
the Biden administration and the Democratic Party are seeking to promote the idea that any institution that doesn't mimic these lies has to be destroyed.
None of them are lies. Duh. He's literally just making stuff up. But he makes a lot of money to make stuff up, so I guess it's good for him.
Religious institutions are not exempted from federal regulations.
Good.
That demand that men who identify as women be treated as women. And this is true in sports, in restrooms. Ironically, feminists who sought to protect women from men have now seen female spaces completely destroyed because they can't define female and male properly.
Is that like an implication that like men are faking this to like assault women or something, which there's no evidence for? I don't know.
Most shockingly, we're now a society that demands that parents hand over their kids to the tender mercies of political actors masquerading as medical specialists.
All medical scientific experts disagree with you, Ben. That's just reality. You can't pretend it away.
If you have a 12-year-old at school with a headache, the school nurse cannot prescribe to them Tylenol without calling you first. But we now have officials in states and in the federal government suggesting that if a 12-year-old says that she is a boy, the school should be able to prescribe puberty blockers without calling a parent.
I don't think so. That just doesn't. He's just making that up. I'm pretty sure you have to talk to a doctor and stuff about that. That's just being made up. That's a doctor decision. Your school doesn't just have those on hand. What? Come on, Ben.
That is a sick society.
It's not, Ben.
In the end, a man claiming to be a woman is making an unsustainable claim. He can't even know what it is like to be a woman because he is not one. A man with surgeries and hormone treatment does not become a woman, nor does a man who simply declares himself a woman.
I don't know. I think it's pretty straightforward. It does seem that simple, Ben. And even though you misunderstood how this works for fucking like 11 minutes straight, it doesn't really change the reality of it.
All of this is insane propaganda.
Oh my
is being
God.
propagated for political purposes.
Oh my God, it's saying the same thing over and over again.
A man cannot become a woman, or a woman a man.
None of what he said was accurate, though, Ben. Everything you said has been wrong. Wow, if that's what a debunking is like, it's no wonder conservatives are so fucking bad at coming up with ideas. Good God, dude. That's what a debunking is? Holy fuck. That was fucking pathetic. That was fucking pathetic. Alright, anyways. Thank you, everyone, for coming through. That was wow, that was something. God. Great. Awesome. Well, yeah, so that's that, and I'll see y'all again soon. Oh, fuck.